Shwan Iskanahe, greetings, everyone. My name is Denise Litz, and I am the Chief for the Division of Economic Development in the Office of Indian Economic Development in Indian Affairs. I just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce myself. I'm originally from the Tuscarora Nation. We're located about 10 miles north of Niagara Falls, New York, but I'm joining you from beautiful Lakewood, Colorado, where I'm remotely working. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. We are so excited to be able to present this fundamentals of grant writing, and we have a very collaborative presentation with administration from Native Americans and also IANTA, the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. So I'm going to go now and turn it over to Elwood Pipestem. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. So a few housekeeping items for today. This webinar is being recorded. Everyone is muted during the presentation. Throughout today's presentation, we will have various moments for question and answer. So at that time, please enter your questions in the chat box, as well as please participate in the polls that we have throughout today's presentation. Slides and a recording of this webinar or presentation will be available to participants early next week. Thank you. Denise, I will hand it back over to you.
Sure, thank you, Elwood. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce our office to all of you. Our director is Anna LeBeau. She comes to us from the Omaha tribe of Nebraska. She's the director. I'm listed there as well. I'm the chief for the Division of Economic Development. Next slide, please. So there are two teams in our divisions. We have an economic development specialist team, and we have the grants management team. I'll talk a little bit about what each of them do. Next slide, please. So our economic development specialists, we have three of them. Janelle Green covers Alaska and Southwest zones. You'll see in the map to the left which states are included. Jim Henry covers the Northwest zone. And we also now have Rebecca Horsechief, who covers the Eastern zone. Next slide, please. So our economic development specialist team, their specific purposes are to deliver virtual presentations and provide information about the grant programs that we offer, as well as connecting tribes with our other division, which is the Division of Capital Investment, which is the Loan Guarantee Program. They also provide help and resources to our non-awarded grant applicants. So anytime tribes or tribal organizations apply for our grant opportunities, if you don't receive funding from us, you are going to get outreach from one of our economic development specialists. We really feel that, we're not the only funding that's available, and we want to make sure that tribes and tribal organizations get the support that they need to continue with their important projects. Okay, next slide. So the other half of our team is the grants management team. Elizabeth Callahan is from Choctaw Nation. Dennis Wilson is Taos Pueblo, and Melanie Welsh is our Alaskan Yupik Eskimo representative. So each of them are working on all 5 of our grant programs in different capacities. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, they manage the 5 grant programs. We have our Indian Business Incubator Program. We call it IBIP. We have the Native American Business Development Institute, or NABD. We have the Tribal Tourism Grant Program, that it's TTGP. That just closed, and we're just finishing up our application review right now. And then we have the National Tribal Broadband Grant, which will be closed out on November 17th, and we are going to be reviewing those applications coming up in January. And then our Living Languages Grant Program, we should be announcing that here in the spring, so we're looking forward to that. The program analyst, which is Elizabeth Callahan, she covers technical assistance support with our contractor, Tribal Tech. She does the web page content management and also helps us with the reporting and compliance for grants. Next slide, please. So Tribal Tech is our technical assistance team. We're pleased to have them under contract with us. We have Christine Celentano, who's the Training and Technical Assistance Project Manager. Elwood Pipestem Ott is the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator. And then Makana Riley is the Training and Technical Coordinator for Hawaii. For our Native Act, we do have money that supports the Native Hawaiian organizations, and Makana provides the technical assistance for that. Next slide, please. Turn this over to Gail so she can introduce herself and the work of IANTA. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Gail Chihak. I'm a Klamath Tribal member and I work for the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. We're based here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Next slide. Here's our development team. Together we explore potential funding opportunities, discuss the programs, and then decide whether it fits within our mission. Next slide.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate that. So welcome to part one, and we're excited that everyone is here. The goal of today's webinar is to increase participant confidence in application life cycle from research, preparation, planning, application writing, and follow-up. We will get started today by providing an overview of planning logistics for grant writing, then dig in with storytelling and writing a grant application, and end with a recap of best practices and describe helpful writing resources. Next, we are going to insert a poll here. On the screen, you will see the OIED regions, zones in the color map here. Red is for the Alaska and Southwest zone. The blue is for the Eastern zone, and the green is for the Northwest zone. So we will launch the poll question first.
Yep, we've got the poll up, Elwood, and we've got about half of our participants that have submitted a response. Let's just give it another minute or so. Great, we've got about 40 more who haven't responded, but they're still coming in. Thank you everyone for participating. All right. I'm going to end the poll here. Last few seconds. Get your answer in. All right, so it looks like about 86% of you all participated, and we've got a great balance here today, which is wonderful. I'm going to just share results here so you can all see. All right, so we'll get right into it here. So our first objective is going to be to provide an overview to you all of preparation and planning logistics for grant writing. And Gail is going to kick us off here.
Today, I'm going to be sharing with you information about funding resources from your local community, from foundations and private resources. A part of my job is to work with the tribes to try and help them identify cultural tourism funding sources. So I spend a lot of my my time looking for new funding resources and then sharing those with our tribes. Next slide. I've encouraged the web links to these resources on the slides, but I want to ask you not to start searching now. You will receive a copy of the slides later. I'm going to quickly go over these resources for the private foundations. Someone else will be discussing the federal grants. So it's easier to start looking for funds at a local level. I usually start on the state level since they make good partners for projects, and the work you're doing usually benefits the whole state. For cultural tourism, I start with tourism agencies to see if they have marketing or development funding. For economic development, I approach the economic development departments. In addition to direct funding, they often have other resources they can bring to the table. Would your project benefit by attending a conference or visiting a successful program? Several state funds fund travel to attend this kind of research. Next slide. Local foundations are found in every state. Applications and reporting are usually easier than federal grants, although the funding sizes are much smaller, usually between $10,000 to $50,000. However, these are good amounts for planning and designing a larger project. They're also really good for festivals, events, small conservation projects, and training. The Council on Foundations offers a search engine to locate foundations in your state. Once you've identified a foundation, call them and see if they'll meet with you to discuss your program, build a relationship. When I moved to New Mexico, I met with the local community foundation and was immediately asked to sit in on one of their panels to learn more about the community. Next slide. We often forget about the churches. Churches are very good funders. They have, you can usually get support from your local church, but there are also national foundations that fund major programs for social and environmental programs. And you don't have to be a member of the denomination to apply. They've helped me fund artist development programs and environmental advocacy. Next slide. The Grantsmanship Center provides free access to its funding state-by-state database with listing and links to the top grant-making foundations and corporate giving programs for each state. It's beneficial to become acquainted with the local corporations that have foundations. They are great sponsors of events. They use their marketing funds to support community events and programs. Don't forget airlines, telephone companies, utility companies. Sometimes they'll provide in-kind support. A utility company with its own printing press printed thousands of our marketing brochures for one of my programs. I also had the gas company provide salmon dinners for over 100 guests, and local restaurants have provided dinners for VIPs and volunteers. Next slide. Candid has this wonderful webpage that has investing in Native communities. Foundation support from large foundations is small. There's only about 4% according to a 2019 report by Native Americans from Philanthropy and Candid. One of the reasons is tribes just don't apply. Often foundations are searching for people, for tribes to apply to their programs. Candid publishes a report on the foundations that have funded Native programs. It's a great place to start looking for foundations for your type of programs. They give you a profile of the foundation and talk about their level of support and the kinds of programs they funded in the past. Next slide. Candid also publishes the Philanthropy News Digest request for proposals. You can sign up and receive these newsletters for free. I want to leave you with one thought. Remember that foundation representatives, program officers, and corporate officers are human. You will be more successful if you can build a personal relationship with them. I was talking to one funder about how difficult it was to ask for money. And one of the things she told me was, you're not just asking for money. You are offering me the opportunity to become a part of your amazing project. So try and humanize your requests. And remember, they're just people on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. So that was intended to be a brief overview, and we'll go into a lot more detail about foundations and federal grants and other corporate opportunities in part 2. So be sure to join us then. My name is Christine Celentano. I work for Tribal Tech, and I work with the Office of Indian Economic Development's Tribal Training and Technical Assistance Program. Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining us. So I'm just going to provide a little overview of, in terms of planning and preparation for writing grants and applications. Grants.gov is a great resource. They offer information and learning for federal funding opportunities. You can explore grant opportunities. You can receive notifications of open grants. You can receive instruction for registration for SAM.gov and to acquire your unique entity identifier number if you don't have that yet. And you can also find a lot of technical assistance, both in how to search, how to use grants.gov, how to register, the different things that are available in grants.gov, and then also grant writing technical assistance. So we just wanted to provide that as an overview for you, but we will explore grants.gov in a little more detail in part 2. Next slide, please. So I would like to introduce Rondell Clay. She's the Regional Director of the Western Region's Training and Technical Assistance Center for the Administration for Native Americans. Rondell's agreed to join us today and share some of her expertise. Rondell has been a trainer and technical assistance provider for the Administration for Native Americans since 2000. She has a diverse professional background in planning, management, education, and administration. For 20 years prior to her work with ANA, which is the Administrations for Native Americans, Ms. Clay's career was focused within Indian education as both an educator and administrator for the Seminole Tribe of Florida's Education Department. Rondell, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Super. Thanks, Christine. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're from. It's good to see all your faces. As mentioned, there are many funding sources available, both federal and nonprofit sources, state sources, local company sources. But before you start reaching out to funding sources or as a preparation for searching for federal sources, you need to know what you're addressing. Funding sources can be focused on specific issues that they want to address. Funding sources can have, excuse me, funding sources can also have specific restrictions, like ANA, for example, doesn't allow construction. They will not fund any kind of construction, nor will they fund any kind of capital lending. Now, they will fund things like office startup or program startup or regulation development. I mean, there are a myriad of things that ANA does fund, but they do have restrictions on what they fund. Also important to know as far as what they fund is whether they request match or not, and what they consider match. There are some programs out there that require cash match only. Those are usually economic development projects, but not all of them are like that. Others allow in-kind services as match or a combination thereof. So you want to be mindful of that to see if that fits into something that you can do. Keep in mind, projects may require several funding sources due to the complexity or the size of the project, due to funding ceiling amounts, maximum project periods allowed, or other restrictions of the funders that we just talked about. Research is key in finding an appropriate funding source. Other knowledge that'll help you in your research is a basic understanding of the resources within your community, and what you are going to need and what you already have within your community to successfully implement that project. Does the funding source allow you to tackle the community challenge head on? Do they allow you autonomy that best fits your project to your community? Some funders, especially within the federal government, have very strict rules and regulations. And once you take money from them, all of the different assurances that are going to be signed, you are basically agreeing to follow their rules and their regulations. Don't chase the money. Try to find a funding source that is matched to what you're trying to do within your community. Next slide, please. So we need to define our community. Sure, your tribe would, the larger tribe is a community. But generally, when you're doing projects, you are looking at a specific group that are going to be the main beneficiaries of your application or the funding project. So you need to look at who those direct beneficiaries are. Some funding sources actually get as specific as saying that they're for veterans. There has to be veterans. They can do that with bonus points. ANA gives bonus points under the SEDS competition, social and economic development strategies. They give bonus points for projects that totally benefit veterans. They also give bonus points for economic development programs. And then again, there's some funding that is strictly, that's all they fund, are veterans programs or elder programs. So look carefully for that when you're researching. And make sure that you know your community well and who the functional leaders are within the community, especially within the population of the community that you're going to be addressing. They will be an invaluable resource for you when you're putting together an application. And while you're looking at resources, by the way, make sure that you not only look within your own community, but look at the surrounding community and the nation as a whole. Sometimes projects are so technical that they require specific expertise that you may not have. So you may have to search a little wider to find folks that can help you implement the project. Next, please. Engaging the community is so important. Hopefully, most of you are going to be starting with some type of community planning process that has gone on. It could have happened 5 or 10 years ago, or you may be starting this process and going through it. In fact, that's one kind of project that ANA does fund. It's important that communities be involved, not just the tribal leaders. Yes, they are mega important, but getting down to the grassroots level where your participants are is super important. They're the ones who are going to speak your praises in the community. They're the ones that are going to encourage folks to take part in your project. So engaging the community from the very beginning, both in planning and implementation, is very important. There are many, many ways of doing this. ANA actually holds project planning and development training, and usually in the fall or winter. I can tell you that in Alaska is doing one, I think, in March or April. But that particular training goes into various methods of engagement, such as surveys, community surveys, facilitation, and conversations during community meetings, focus groups, stakeholder interviews, that kind of thing. So please make sure to make community engagement important to the planning part of your funding opportunity. And I think we're going to go to a poll.
Thank you, Rondell. Yep, I'm just going to briefly share this poll regarding partnerships. We're wondering what the benefits are of considering partnerships for a proposed project. If you're able to see the poll on your screen, it might be a little harder on a phone if you're calling in from a phone, but if you're able to see the poll, participate, please. And we'll give another 30 seconds or so to let everyone chime in with their thoughts. All right, we've got more than half of you who have participated. All right, I'm going to end the poll here and I'll share results. It was a bit of a trick question, perhaps. But maybe some of you think that specific things are of the utmost benefit. Our thoughts, I think, were that all of these are significant benefits. And I will just throw it back to Rondell.
Super, thank you, Makana. As our poll just pointed out, partnerships can bring expertise, resources, training, and sustainability to your projects. Be sure you identify local and network resources available to you both inside and outside the community. Remember, partnerships are reciprocal relationships. Both parties should be benefiting in some way from the partnership. It is important to communicate regularly with your partners before, during, and after a project to maintain the partnership relationship. not all partners will have to be identified in a funding application. However, for key partners mentioned in the application, you should have letters of commitment to the project and what they are contributing. If the partner is providing an in-kind service, you should also have them add an estimated cost for the in-kind services that they are going to provide. Do not forget to acknowledge your partner's contribution during the project. A local newspaper article touting the project's accomplishments and the partners who contributed to the success can work very well, and it goes a long way. Even a certificate of recognition works. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be as simple as a certificate. And one last note about partnerships. If the partner is providing subject matter expertise, try to include a staff member or an intern that will assist to build local capacity. This is a sustainability strategy that shouldn't be overlooked. We're going to talk about sustainability a little bit later, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. Next slide. So we've talked about community, we've talked about engagement. The grant writing tip here is to sit down, make a list of all the different things that you need to pull together for the grant opportunity. Don't forget tribal resolutions. As many of you know, tribal resolutions can take quite a while to obtain them. It just depends on the organization of an individual tribe. Letters of support from community members and partners, letters of commitment from partners, all of those kinds of things take time to gather. So make sure that you include them in your planning timeline. I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, questions, that's right. Questions.
Thank you, Rondell. So far, it looks like there are not any questions in the chat. I've been just sort of soft reminding everyone as we go along to share questions as they arise, and we will have multiple breaks here like this to address questions. So feel free to enter questions as they come up. Next slide, Elwood. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move on here to our next objective, which is storytelling and writing a grant application. Christine will share on this. So I'll throw it over to Christine.
Thank you, Makana, and thanks, Rondell. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about preparing to write. Some key questions. I'm just going to throw them out there. These are things for you to think about, and you've heard a little bit about this in some of Rondell's talking, and also Gail. So what has previously been done before? Consider explaining both challenges and opportunities when you get ready to write. You want to explore those and make sure you understand what they are in the area you're trying to work in. So as well, who needs to be involved? Will you have partners? Are there volunteers? Is a resolution required? We're going to keep saying that because that has really stopped some applications in their tracks by not being able to acquire the support letters and resolutions that are required. What's the access to your leadership? When do you have to get onto a calendar with your proposed project idea to get leadership's approval, input, feedback. When's the best time to present your project idea and to whom? So additionally, what resources are available to get you started? Do you have access to past winning proposals? Are there recent community demographics available? What kind of financial information needs to be accessed and presented in an application? Determine whether there are accounting staff or financial resources to help you put a project budget together. And what will it take for you to reach and organize your resources? Where will you put the proposal together? Is it just you at a desk, or are you going to have to access other people? And do you need to get together, and how often? Is there a good place to line that out and think about it? How long do you have to plan to write the proposal? Did the council just see this and say to you, wow, this is due in 2 weeks, but we really want to apply for this? So think about realistic expectations and how much time you need to actually plan and write a proposal. How will this be accomplished, and who will do which parts of the proposal? It's a best practice to consider, if possible, developing a steering or advisory committee for your planned project. Next slide, please. So as you research and prepare, we mentioned a couple of things that are worth repeating. Are there strategic planning documents? Has anyone done a needs assessment lately? And are there any priority setting documents that have come from council or other organizations in your tribal community? Review these and determine a project idea based on community or client priorities. You want to align your project with an overall community strategic plan or departmental goal, either one of those, so that you can show that you're proposing a project that aligns with the overall community. Consider creating a team for grant writing, find training. There's a lot of free training out there. Attend a workshop and source online resources. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the first thing that's going to start out your project narrative. You're going to describe the current community condition, or otherwise known as statement of need. You want to use this section to explain what you do and why you do it, who you serve, what difference does your work make for those folks that you serve, and why are you the right one to address this? So you're going to identify and carefully describe the community to be served by the project. You're going to include demographics, which are statistics pertinent to the project, share community assessments or needs for a proposed project. And I just want to mention that the housing and urban development generally have a comprehensive and current demographic portfolio for your community, especially if you have any planned infrastructure or home improvement or home building projects in your community. So they're a good resource to tap into to get some of those more specific community demographics. The foundation of a well-designed project is based on the effective identification and analysis of the current measurable community conditions and the barriers preventing the community from achieving the identified long-term goals. So you've got your strategic plans, you have an idea for your proposed project based on the needs assessment that's been done in your community, and you want to be able to design your project accordingly. So using a community-based assessment process is a starting point for identifying specific community conditions and the barriers that exist that have prevented the project from ever moving forward. The community identifies those conditions and barriers through the community planning process, as described earlier by Rondell, through community meetings, surveys, focus groups, and other engagement activities. We repeat this because it's really important. Community planning, community buy-in, everything to do with your community. They will be engaged in your project. They will help move the project forward, and their support is critical. So we need to keep hammering that point home. Next slide, please. So you can use a community condition to present both objective and subjective data in an application. So you can include the local and project relevant statistics that demonstrate the need in your community. And then you can also use subjective data, testimonials from people in the community that have witnessed or been a part of your work in the past, or people that can also demonstrate the need. So they may have a story they want to share to say why it's important to have this project in the community. So you can include both those things in an application. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to jump into project goals. So very relevant and related to what we just talked about. You're going to determine a project goal based on all the information we just spoke about. It's generally written as visionary, it's general, it's intangible. And so I provided an example here, and it is the White Bison Elementary student academic performance is enhanced through participation in a reach intensive project working in partnership with the local tribal Boys and Girls Club. So we'll take this example through the discussion of project objectives. Next slide, please. So project objectives, and I found this to be true in almost all the work I've done. Generally, it doesn't matter who the funder is, if it's a foundation or if it's the government, SMART objectives are what is advised to follow. And the acronym SMART is an acronym, and it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, sometimes called attainable, relevant and results oriented, and time bound. Next slide, please. So Makana's going to deliver a poll to you here. Back to you, Makana.
Okay,
So-
there we go. Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, just in the example provided, is this objective specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound? Yes or no?
Thank you, everyone, for jumping in. We've got about half participation so far. Again, the question here is, in the example on this slide, is this a SMART objective? It's a yes or no question, just in case you can't see it if it's not showing up on your screen. Okay, I think I'm going to end the poll here, and I will share results out. We've got about 70% participation. Thank you to everyone who was able to participate. There you go, Christine.
Okay, thanks. So those of you that said yes are correct. Without a whole project narrative to look at and be able to determine whether, some things are exactly right or not, I'll just go ahead and explain why I believe this is a SMART objective. We will have evaluated 50 enrolled after-school students and provided tutoring service makes this specific. So the S in SMART. At least 80% have improved reading or math scores by 1 letter grade, which makes this measurable. It's unlikely we can determine from this example whether the objective is achievable or attainable. So those of you who said no might have been leaning towards that. However, the writer would have included narrative about the organization's ability the organization's ability and approach to meet the objectives, so you would know a little bit more. You'd have a little more context if this were a full proposal. The project has a goal to increase learning for students, and this objective as written is relevant. So this will stand as an example. It ends, by the way, at the end of the school year by May 31st. So this makes it time bound. So that hits all the SMART criteria. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about writing the grant application. Consider utilizing the 4 Ps. I'm just gonna, sorry, 1 second. For the ask. So you're going to want to include people, place, plot, and purpose. And I always say, don't forget, you'll include this, you'll include a plan. So in your project narrative, you want to talk about who you are, who you're serving, where you're located, information about potential challenges on where you're located, because that will come into play. For instance, if you're in a real remote community, if you're up at the top of Alaska, your costs may be increased. And this is where you want to talk about that a little bit, so that when your budget comes up later, we'll talk about budget, it makes sense to people. The reviewers do not know, application reviewers do not necessarily know your community or your challenges or even what you might be great at. So remember to include relevant, important information to help someone get to know your community. And then the plot is generally about your current community condition or the need. And you're going to talk about how you plan to address that need. And the purpose will be your ultimate outcome. If you put this project together and implement it in your community, what's the outcome? So the goal is to most effectively share your story to raise money, whether it's through foundations or federal or other government funders. You want to think about the most effective way to share your story and develop it according to the application evaluation criteria provided in a request for a proposal, a notice of funding opportunity, or a solicitation. So you really want to pay attention to that evaluation criteria. This approach, just starting right there, even once you've done your community planning and determine your project, that is a best practice for putting an application together, because that is what your application will be scored on. A lot of federal entities and foundations give really good guidance on the kind of information they're looking for in your project narrative. And it usually includes a detailed description of your planned resources and will demonstrate an action plan. So we'll discuss this more in detail on the next slide. And remember to plan for your required internal processes, which can take time to adhere to, like acquiring leadership approval or securing community buy-in or meeting funder priorities and administrative requirements that are required to actually submit the application. So keep those things in mind. Next slide, please. So you want to provide a succinct project narrative or project description. So give details about your project in 3 ways. There's inputs, which are your activities, resources, staff, volunteers you need to operate the project. There's throughputs, which is your plan of action, timeline, support services, facilities, transportation. Outputs are what will be achieved as a result of implementing your program. So include a description of anticipated positive impact on the community from implementing your project. And remember to document a planned approach to include outcomes expected from the project. Organizing your narrative by criteria by which the application will be reviewed and assessed is a best practice. Next slide, please. Okay, here's an example of an objective work plan resource tool used by ANA, which is the Administration for Native Americans. An objective work plan is helpful to organize your inputs, throughputs, and outcomes. and shows how one plans to accomplish a planned objective and reach the goal. In this example, you include a project title, the project goal, and the project year you intend to work on this objective. Keep in mind, with some applications, you may have a multi-year proposal, 1, 2, or 3 years, for example. You may have only one objective planned or several objectives. In each year, you will write your objective work plan for each planned objective and separately for each year. You can identify the objective number and describe the anticipated outcomes in this form. And I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like filled out. You may use this format for each objective you have planned and order them by year if this is a multi-year or multi-objective proposal. Next slide, please. Okay, so this shows an example given the project goal that we shared earlier. This shows an example of how it would be filled out. And this is a very simple tool, but it's really instrumental in organizing your thoughts and how you're going to implement your project. This will be provided in the resources list we share with you, a template for utilizing this. I also wanted to mention that the ANA PPD manual, the project planning and development manual, will also be part of the resources that are shared with you following this workshop. So you can see that the project title is up here. You want to be consistently using these same 3 things, the project title, the project goal, and then be sure to be clear about which year you're talking about. So in this case, objective 1 gives the objective we just went through. And the outcome is that the students will receive targeted instruction in math and reading improvement, improving classroom and individual performance. So that's the anticipated outcome of this objective. And then there's some activities here you can take a look at. You'll see that the outputs are available there. So if you're going to organize high school student volunteer tutors, you're going to recruit at least 5. And so the output would be 5 tutors. It says which staff is responsible. And then there's a start and an end date. And on the start and end date, be sure you make these very realistic. Think that through and make sure you put the appropriate amount of time in there. So that's where I end. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dennis Wilson, who is an OIED grants management specialist. And he's joined us today to walk us through additional important elements to include in your project description or narrative. Dennis?
Good
Hey,
afternoon,
Dennis.
everybody.
Sorry, Dennis, it's McKenna.
Hey.
Before you get started, I wonder if it's okay for me to just chime in with a couple questions that came up before we turn it over to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, and it might be some things that you can answer, or maybe Christine would like to answer. So I'm just going to acknowledge that within the chat, there was a question regarding how to be a panelist in the grant review process. I'm just entering the answer and question back into the chat because Denise put the link in for those that are interested. So that's new at the bottom of your chat. Also, let's see. Oh, someone was asking specifically about if there's training available in terms of reading and understanding a NOFO, and Denise also chimed in about that. And we will be covering that on the second portion of the webinar presentation, which is next week, December 15th. And then finally, the last question that came in is, what purpose does the Federal Register serve when looking and seeking grants or compliance?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are also going to cover that in part 2. So we knew these questions might come up, but we are going to go into detail on reading a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity. We're going to go through a request for proposal attached to perhaps a foundation or a corporation that puts out a request for a proposal. We're going to discuss a letter of intent and what needs to go into a letter of intent or inquiry that you might submit to a foundation. And we're also going to go a little bit through, we're going to walk you through, show you, do a little tour of grants.gov and all the resources that are there. And we are also going to share other additional funding sources with you in part 2. So thank you for the question. We do have that on deck for next week, and we hope you'll join us at that time.
Great. Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, great. All the questions are answered, or they're going to be answered. So I'll save that instead of, trying to quickly chime in here. I only got a few slides, but I do want to start out by saying, being on this side of the fence, on the federal aid side, everything that's been said thus far by all the ladies has been spot on. I mean, I see that resonate through the applications when we're in the review and that entire process up to awarding or non-awarding. Everything that they said comes into play. So I hope everyone's taking good notes, or they'll get access to the slide, because this is great. So the first slide we'll talk about is consider contingency planning. I like that question, what could go wrong? And what is the importance? In some ways, it's essential. Some of the key points you'll see on here, and we'll go through a few of them, but just anticipating potential hurdles. I know no one wants to, have the mindset of always hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. But a lot of times you have to have that kind of thinking moving forward. Filling positions, especially once the project started, especially if you're in some remote areas, and access to those that have those skill sets, or just people that are in that industry is going to be tough. So securing those, making sure you have those plans in place in case something happens to one of them, especially if they're wearing a lot of hats, which, most of us do. Weather delays, especially those that are in areas where it's seasonal, be it weather related or in the conservation world, you can't get into some areas due to, nesting cycles and things like that. Key partnerships, that's key. If some of those fall through, even the big ones, the consultants, do you have a lot of them lined up? And we'll get into consultants here in a bit, but again, just thinking ahead, being cognizant that stuff happens. Nobody anticipated COVID, but here we are. So, varying national disasters, are you touching on things and at least having a plan? And the biggest one that affects most all of us is tribal council and tribal board of director changes. That changes the vision, that changes which direction they want to go, especially with funding. A lot of times they need to understand that some of this has already been in place and it can't be changed, especially with our OIEDs, discretionary competitive grant programs. Once the statement of work is in place and you're awarded, they can't be changed. So those are other hurdles to anticipate. Next slide, please. So looking at an evaluation plan, this is where your project objectives are going to meet your program outputs. You want to show the funder that their investment produced results. Mostly this is alignment. Like Rondell was talking and addressing the appropriate, seeking the appropriate funding source and the proper utilization for your projects, making sure that alignment is there. Your proposal needs to explain how you will track both the objective and subjective outcomes. It'd be good to have benchmarks along the way. This section of the application will include methods that you'll use, like attendance numbers, testing, data, software reports, communication, things of that nature. Next slide, please. Here's an example, outcome tracker template example. I like this. It's an example created by NA in their regional training and technical assistance centers. It'll be included in the resource kit, so you'll be able to utilize that or use a form thereof. Now, when it comes to writing your application, using a tracker like this will help plan to evaluate your projects to reviewers. So the outcomes and outputs can be tracked to evaluate whether the project is on track, and it'll assist in reporting to the funder community and leadership, which is always key through the grant. Next slide, please. Here's a good part, organizational description. Include everything pertinent here. I know, yet be precise or concise. Be thorough yet concise. You may want to include your mission statement, vision statement, and some of those that were listed here. But you'll likely have these pieces in your identity content already, but you'll bring it to the front. Each grant application specifies which to include, so you pretty much know that going in. Of course, much of this information is going to be included in previous applications, but you're going to review and decide what you're going to use going forward and for this specific funding that you're applying for. You should leave out information that's not requested or that's unnecessary, so you're not, completely bogging it down, but apply it to that NOFO or the RFP. You can give examples of how applications, well, more is not necessarily better, so just be thorough yet concise. Next slide, please. Grant writing tip time. You will modify your existing organizational descriptive information for each grant proposal as requested. I know that goes without saying, but with a lot of you want to give it a good read and make sure that, you're really presenting and your alignment is there. You're not including things that really don't apply for this particular funding. It could relate, but, keep it concise. Be aware of application restrictions, like page limits, word amounts, character limits, things like that. Some aids do keep hard limits, but some are soft, like they want to keep you in a general range. But just be cognizant of that and apply your application strategy to that. Make sure you don't violate those. Next slide, please. Organizational capacity. We got some points here. What are your past programs developed and implemented? What did those include? Grant management experience and training. Do you have existing and planned qualified staff to manage your proposed project? Leadership support, community buy-in. I think Rondell was saying about bringing in interns in building that sustainability. I think that's fantastic. Financial responsibility and accountability. And finally, policies and procedures and if and when they can meld with consultants, which we'll do that here in the next slide. Next slide, please. So consultant resources, it's another resource that'll fill the gaps for skills and expertise and getting that subject matter expertise. It's also going to help build your organizational capacity. A request for a qualification or a request for a proposal will help in selecting those consultants. The RFQ is a request for a quote that'll contain a statement of a specific work required with the qualifications and performance expectations that are needed. And then the RFP is going to be used to develop an inventory of potential consultants for assisting with that project. So the consultant agreement should be clearly, and it should describe clearly the consultant's responsibilities. Really flesh this out as much as possible so there's a complete understanding of what is and what isn't involved. And it should also specify how and from when the consultants will receive direction and supervision of those alignments to make sure they're not overstepping bounds or stepping on toes. We deal a lot with this, so we could spend a lot of time on this slide. One of the most important things is vetting. Really vet these consultants, making sure that they have, and it all comes down to data, right? But they have the local data. They're utilizing local resources, making sure the data as it's going to be used for making these decisions on, whatever course you're going applies to what's going on here. Having all the national data is great, especially for forecasting, but it may not help with what you're trying to do here, right here on the ground. Again, Rondell, Christine really touched on a lot of this earlier. Data. With that, again, we could spend a lot of time on this slide, but I want to turn it back over to Rondell, and I think we're wrapping this up.
Great. Thanks, Dennis. That was very important, everything that you covered. Now we're going to go on to budgets. Budget formats are usually pretty much the same. They're going to use cost categories. Those cost categories are usually larger overview kinds of things, and they'll want you to break down those cost categories into the number of employees and how long those people are going to work. Are they full-time? Are they part-time? If they're part-time, how many hours? That kind of thing. And then you'll have things like travel supplies. And then there's a lovely category, catch-all category, other. One of the things that it is important when putting together a budget, work with your accounting department. Don't try to put a budget together for your a proposal without talking to them. At least let them look over the budget and make sure that all of the calculations are right, that the percentages are right, that kind of thing. Budget should be, you should also use other departments within your tribal organization. For example, your personnel or human resource. I've seen too many grants where a grant writer just pulled numbers off the top of their head. And it turned out that the number that they put in there was not sufficient to hire the level of expertise that was needed for the project. So it's really important that you do your homework. You look to see if there is possibly a salary scale already in place with your tribal organization. Look at that salary schedule. If it's not going to fly, do whatever you have to do to justify a higher salary for the position. Do your budget last. Get your project worked out, get all the pieces together, exactly what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it, so that when you cost the project, you're getting a more accurate look. A lot of people work in teams, and they'll have a program specific person, they'll have a grant writer, and they'll have a financial person who works on the budget. The writer and the program person are talking constantly, but the budget person tends to get left out of the conversation. And then you get an application that you're turning in where the budget doesn't match what you have said in the rest of the application. So to avoid that, put your budget together last, make sure whoever is doing the budget, if it's not you, is very familiar with what you're doing and how you're doing it. Use your tribes, as Christine said before, use your tribe's policies, their travel policies for travel, procurement policies for purchasing supplies, materials, personnel policies for consultants, taking care of consultants. Don't forget to include those. That's what those guys are there for. They're paid for out of indirect cost, which most tribes have. And they're also there to help you stay in compliance, because when an auditor comes and visits a tribe, they look at your policies and procedures and judge whether you are using your policies or procedures. As program folks, or grant writers, you don't do that on a regular basis. So you probably never even read the procurement policies and procedures, but it's important that there is something in place so that you're following them. Like I said before, don't pull numbers off the top of your head. Include some time in your planning process to do some extensive internet searching, especially for large ticket items. Best practice with large ticket items, if your project is going to ask for a trailer, modular building, vehicle, those kinds of things, you're going to want to include a quote or two to show the reviewers and show the agency that you have done your homework and what you're asking for in the budget is a reasonable amount. Okay, so backing up what you put in the budget is important. We do have some resources. Next slide. Over on the left, you will see a link to the Justice Department, Office for Violence Against Women. They have a budget template in there that is very, very detailed. And I really like it, but again, it's super detailed. And then A&A also has a pre-application toolkit, and in that toolkit, we have a template that not only allows you to do your budget, but it also allows you to do your narrative. One of the things that I did not mention on the previous slide, but is mentioned here on the right, is knowing the cost principles for the funding source you are going after. Good news is that for the federal government, they all use basically the same cost principles that are contained in 2 CFR Part 200. There are links to looking at both the cost principles and audit requirements, as well as general procurement standards. It's really important for a grant writer to have a basic understanding. You do not want to ask for something that is going to be not allowable. It is better to know what you're getting into, know what you can get from one funding source, so that possibly you can go to another funding source to get the things you couldn't get from the first one. Okay, and finally, one of the things, next slide, please. One of the things that 2 CFR Part 200 requires is that you are able to match up the activities you are going to be carrying out in your project to the budget. Okay, so the narrative is a way for you to not only explain how you calculated, how you came to $4,923 as a cost for 2 people to attend a food sovereignty conference. And I'm making that amount up. Please don't add everything up on me, because I didn't pay attention to it. But it also allows you to explain why that attending that conference is important to the successful implementation of your project. Okay. All righty. Personnel, real quick. Salary, you're going to want to put how much time the person is spending, each individual position that is either being paid for out of the funds you're getting from the funding source, or as in kind and match. so that they know exactly how many hours the person is going to be working. Are they full-time? Are they part-time? We talked about that before. Also remember, don't forget fringe benefits. And this is another place where getting help from your accountant is going to really help. Some NOFOs want just a total, an average percentage for fringe benefit, percentage of salary for fringe benefit. Other funders like A&A, for example, prefers that you break it out by percentages. Now, keep in mind that some rates may vary depending on what something like workman's comp. So work with your accountant on those. Supplies, you can see here that we talked about what we were getting and how each of the things that we're getting tied back to the project. And that's basically it. You want to give them a nice clean breakout by line item for what you're asking for. And you want to explain how you arrived at those costs and why they tie back, how are they going to help you successfully implement this project. Next slide, please. Sustainability. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Funders want assurances that their funds will be put into good use, that the funds have a long-term impact and the project's benefits continue to the target community even after the funding goes away. A sustainability plan may be called for in the NOFO. A&A definitely calls for one in their NOFO. It spells out how you're planning to keep the benefits moving forward. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to keep the same exact services that you had when you had those special funds earlier. It's how is the community going to continue to benefit and get the same benefits, similar benefits to what they got when you did have funding for the program. Now, there are several ways to do that. That is to, and they're outlined here on the slide, the institutionalization, a continuation of some of the activities supported within the organizations, possibly under your department, the program department, or maybe in concert with other departments. Your partnerships could be long-term and keep you sustainable. You might be selling something or getting program income in some way, and that can be used for as part of sustainability. Programmatic funding, there may be other funds out there that fund long-term projects that can help you continue on. And then, of course, both Dennis talked about consultants and I've talked about partners. The big thing with both consultants and partners is interns or employees that work with those people that have the specialized knowledge, and make it a requirement of partners or consultants to train someone under them from your community. That's so important. Sometimes we pay consultants to come in, exorbitant amount of money to do things, and the minute they walk out of the reservation or off the reservation, or they turn in their final report, boom, the knowledge is gone. So if you can, get internships or find people who are interested in whatever is going on, building the capacity from within should be a priority when you're writing funding applications. Next. Project summary. This is the first thing that is going to be read by grant reviewers. However, it should be the absolute last thing that you write before you have to turn in your application. And the reason you want to do that is because in the writing process, you may have started out thinking you were going to implement the project one way, and as you talked about it and planned it, it took a turn to the right and it changed a little bit. So you want to make sure that the information that you're putting in your project summary is the actual objective and outcomes that you've said that you want in your application. It's important to show that consistency. They do usually ask for this, and I will tell you that I have been on review panels, managed review panels, both as a reviewer. I've been a chair, as well as just a panel manager. And I've seen people look at this summary and just totally turn off from a project. So spend a little time on it. I'm not saying a whole lot of time, but make sure it reads well, so that it catches the reviewer's attention and wants them to go into the rest of the application. All righty. Final slide for me. A writer's tip. You've already heard, and they put the link for becoming a reviewer for the economic development projects. Well, A&A needs those reviewers too, so I'm going to be shameless and I'm going to put in the information for becoming an A&A reviewer. Because we're in Department of Health and Human Services, we have a totally different process than the Department of Interior does. I will tell you, it's not an easy job necessarily, and every grant is different how they review it. But if you really want to know what the agency wants and how they look at different things, become a reviewer. That's the fastest way to, get more inside knowledge about what they're looking for in their reviews. And I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Rondell. So there are not any questions in the chat, and we are tight on time here. So I'm going to just push on here, and we'll just get through the last few slides, and we can all stay on if people still have questions. But I just want to make sure to finish up the presentation for those who might need to leave. So I'm passing it on to Elwood, I believe, for our recap.
Thank you. So just a quick recap: application preparation and writing best practices. So do read through a request for proposal, RFP, or notice of funding opportunity, NOFO, thoroughly, just to make sure that you got everything, you cross your T's, dot your I's. Check for any frequently asked questions. Identify a funder point of contact for questions, if not answered by the particular FAQs that you find, and look for available training or technical assistance. So don't forget to identify your resources, such as former grants won, contributing staff, securing a match or in-kind resources ahead of time. And don't put off funding or put off writing the application. We know it's tough wearing many hats, and sometimes it just gets workload is pretty heavy, but don't put it off. And then don't delay securing commitments of support for the proposed subject, community leadership, partners, tribal resolution. And moving right along. So what if you're not funded? It happens. Learn how to improve. Look for available technical assistance. Request application reviews or the comments or feedback that you might be able to get from that contact that you was able to locate for that funder or that grant opportunity. And the research, free online or in-person courses is available. I think Christine mentioned earlier, there is an abundance of different trainings available. And then mentioned also in this portion today is apply to become a reviewer. That way you get a little more experience. You get to see some things that folks consider or what they're graded on. So just to also let you know, I know we're running tight on time. We will be providing a resources available probably next week with the topics covering from project planning and preparation, storytelling and grant writing application. That is going to include various things with the strategic plan template, grant writing templates, links for different funding sources that was provided earlier by Gail. And, I know that we have a lot of seasoned grant writers that have joined us today. So if you could, at this time, we invite you to please put in the chat some common pitfalls or best practice tips into the chat. And we're going to compile these and share these with participants with the resources toolkit. So at this time, we'll just take a quick minute or two. I know we're running tight on time, but please put those in the chat of some best practices.
And as everyone is doing that, I just want to remind everyone that all registrants will be receiving the slides, and then we will also be making this recording available on our website. That might take a little longer as we need to ensure that closed captioning is set up and correct. So that takes a little bit of editing on our part, but yes, all the slides will be made available to everyone, and then also the recording.
Are there any questions? You can feel free to put in the chat. We do have a survey that we're going to input into the link soon, but just wanted to give everyone enough time to type in the chat their best practices or common pitfalls that they've seen or experienced.
And we'll be saving all of your comments to include and share out to everyone.
And the resources that we'll be providing, those are going to be, storytelling, grant writing, things to help with the preparation, the planning, and the follow-up portions of the grant life cycle. And
so just before we get to the participant survey, Elwood, I wonder if I can there's a couple of quick questions, and I think Rondell or Denise might chime in.
Okay.
Regarding becoming a reviewer. And so one of the questions is about a stipend, if there's a stipend available for reviewer opportunities, and then also how long does it take to hear about being a reviewer?
Christine, do you want me to take that?
I mean, you can cover it for ANA Rondell, and I'll cover it for OIED because I'm under the impression it might be different.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
You go first.
Okay, Denise. For ANA, you're going to submit an application they have a standard data form to fill out, and they also want to see your resume so that they can determine what you're best compatible for. Yes, there is a stipend. As far as timing goes, ANA will tell you from the get-go when they're going to panel. But unfortunately, because there is not very much time between when a grant closes and when paneling starts, you usually don't get notified whether you are needed as a reviewer or not until just before the review starts, the week before usually. But they will tell you dates earlier on. Okay, up to you, Denise.
So I shared the link with everyone on how to apply to be a reviewer for us. We just finished the tourism application review, and we have an upcoming broadband application review. It's very similar to ANA that you'll be informed if you're selected. I don't know, they like to have just a whole base of reviewers that we can pull from as we move forward into our grant season. So I can't say, I don't want them to give feedback and say, I'm sorry you weren't selected, because there may be other opportunities. So you'll just have to be patient and wait and see if you get selected for the particular grant timing. As far as the payment, our grant solutions team will tell you about that, because there's a different amount of reimbursement for the panel chair as there is for the reviewer. So I am happy to, if you fill out the information, you'll get connected to them and you can get more information from them. Thank you.
And to reiterate, Denise, ANA is the same in that the remuneration for a chair and a reviewer are different. A chair gets a little more because they have a report that has to be written that summarizes comments. So that's why they get a little bit more. And our process actually is very similar to Denise's. If you don't get called to review the first panel, there's usually a follow-up panel, and you could get called for that. Also, reviewers drop out. You know, family emergencies happen, illness happens. Not being a first-time reviewer, they tend to underestimate the amount of time it's going to take to be a reviewer. And so we are always calling folks at the last minute and asking them to fill in panels and that kind of thing. So like Denise said, please, please, please be patient.
Great, thank you. Elwood, back to you.
Thank you, Makana. Just wanted to let everyone know that we did upload into the chat the survey, the participant survey. To be clear, please take the time to provide us your feedback and take the time to answer the questions that are in that survey. And as you all are completing the survey, just a reminder that part 2 of the fundamentals of grant writing will be next week, December 15th at 2 p.m. to 3:30 Eastern time. And we will go over the notice of funding opportunities, the request for proposals, letters of inquiry or intent, and explore various funding resources. So encourage you all to be on the lookout. Should have the calendar invite with the Zoom link. So please join us for part 2, where we take a deep dive into the NOFOs, the RFPs, and the LOIs, and where to find funding resources. And Denise, I'd like to turn it over to you. closing.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We are so happy to have had so many people available to hear about the fundamentals of grant writing. And we really look forward to next week when we'll dig a little deeper into NOFOs. So we'll be sending out the information and the PowerPoints hopefully in the next week or so. And thank you again for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you for all the knowledge.